Hey new bodies, here with episode 21. Can't believe we've already done more than 20 of these. And this is the last in our series on my 10 principles, all focused on helping you get on the right side of the health and fitness equation and stay there. So this is number 10. It's not as intense as the others, but it's as important, if not more important, to really setting you up to be the expert to keep on the right side of that health and fitness equation. And this one is very simple. It's one word and it's just read. So the 10th principle, the last principle, the foundation that will keep you going forward is to read. And specifically, I look for two categories of things when I recommend reading to people. One is the really intense stuff that's going to educate you about health, about fitness, about what to eat, when to eat, how to eat it, how to work out smart, how to stay motivated, how to understand what's going on in your body and your body's performance, get through the tough times, put you in a better place in terms of knowing the right ways to move and how to deal with injury. So really focused on really the core of your body and your mind. So getting your mind in the right place and your outlook on things. The other thing that I like to recommend to people is the more inspirational, sort of lighter fare. It's great to get that hardcore stuff, but you kind of need a break from it from time to time. So I like to balance one really intense, deep educational book with something that's a little bit more like a story, something a little more entertaining, and you still take away a lot of lessons and motivation, but you do it in a way that doesn't feel quite as intense. And I think it's really important to have a balance there. So I want to share some of those books with you. And I've got a whole list of books if you go to newbodies/books. But then if you also click through to our Amazon store, so if you go to New Bodies and you look at the store link, right at the bottom of the drop down there is Amazon. And if you follow that, there's every book that I'm recommending across the mind and body health and fitness piece, but also just the general inspiration and general enjoyment category. There's business books, there's autobiographies or biographies. There's just really a wide range of things in that second category. So try to give you some enjoyment and also make sure you take away some lessons. But I want to pull out 4 from the mind and body health and fitness space that I think are really crucial. And then I've got 5 from the sort of general, like just the enjoyable side of things that you'll also take some really key lessons from. And I want to share those with you today. And again, you can get all of them at newbodies/books. The first one is what I actually mentioned before in episode 17 when I talked about protein. I was talking a lot about how the body deals with fat and why we get fat. And that actually is the title of the book. It's Why We Get Fat by an author named Gary Taubes. He's written 2 books on the subject. The first is incredibly long, scientific, deep, might go over people's heads, a lot of people's heads. His second book, the attempt was to make that information a bit more attainable and understandable. It's still a lot to get through, but it's really a fantastic book. I actually did a blog review on this a while ago, back when I read it. The way he cuts it up is the first 10 chapters are really to try to get you to understand what it is that gets us fat versus what the sort of mainstream accepted notions are. So if you're someone who really believes the mainstream notion of calories in, calories out, then you're going to want to read the whole book. Calories in, calories out at a very basic level is you eat this many calories. If you expend that many calories, then your weight stays even. If you expend that many calories plus more, then your weight will come down. If you expend fewer calories than you're eating, your weight will go up. In theory, in very basic terms, that does play out, but it really depends what calories you're eating, not necessarily how many of them you eat. So Taubes really spends the first 10 chapters trying to change your mind about that established notion. And then from chapter 11 on, really gives you the ammunition you need to better your diet and to really do a fantastic job in doing that so you can get on the right side of your weight goals and stay there and eat much healthier. And you'll see it's more than just your weight. It's things like your blood pressure and your cholesterol level. A whole number of biomarkers that you get screened for in an annual blood test with your physical. You'll see how much better off you can be with the education that he gives you. So Why We Get Fat by Gary Taubes, really crucial bit of reading. The next book is Choose to Be Happy. Now this one isn't about lifting weights or your diet. It's about your mind, and that's incredibly crucial. So Choose to Be Happy is by an author named Wayne Froggatt. That's available on Kindle. It's a little bit hard to come by in print, but it does come up from time to time. Sometimes it's extremely expensive, even in paperback. Sometimes it isn't. So if you do have a Kindle or really any device, a PC, a Mac, an iPhone, an Android device, a tablet, you can get the Kindle app for free on any of those, and you can download it that way. And it's only about 10 or 11 bucks. It is a fantastic book. It's actually 3 books that I think are really pivotal for changing your outlook and your mentality and how you go about things. One of them, The Happiness Advantage, I've talked about before. I think it's a great book, but it's a little bit business focused at times. So the settings that it talks about are about in the corporate environment, and it's also just a little bit kind of fun and light, which is not a bad thing. But the lessons aren't necessarily as crystal clear, and the takeaways aren't as impactful. It's really useful information, but it's not sort of here's a problem and here's how you can handle it. There's a really sort of seminal work in the space called Learned Optimism by Dr. Martin Seligman that is an absolutely fantastic book. And Froggatt's book, Choose to Be Happy, actually follows the exact same principles. The difference is all in the writing style and the delivery. If you're up for it, Seligman's book, absolutely must read. It is fantastic, but it's a lot more to take in. It's much longer than Choose to Be Happy, and it takes quite a while until you start to get to the lessons of what to do about the situation. So what Seligman does is really look at the optimism versus pessimism side of things and takes you through why pessimism is detrimental and what to do about it to have a more optimistic outlook and all the pros that come with being more optimistic. And this is not about ignoring reality. This isn't about that book, The Secret, that's sort of saying, like, tell yourself you already won the lottery and you'll win it. It's not fairy tales and sort of detaching from reality. It's about being very realistic about things, but how you handle that reality. That's all it is. It's not saying, put on your blinders. It's that life is life and you can deal with it differently. So Froggatt's title is really crucial. It's Choose to Be Happy, right? So whatever situation we're in, we can't necessarily change that situation, or you can't change what's happened, but what you can impact is the choices that you make and how you deal with that situation. And Seligman before him and Froggatt in his book take you through step by step how you go about that transformation, how you go about controlling your reactions to situations and events so that you aren't pessimistic, so that you aren't brought down, so that you don't feel like your world has caved in or it hasn't actually caved in. It's incredibly powerful stuff, and I love the way that Froggatt delivers it. He goes right into teaching you. So it's, here's a problem, here's how to handle it. Here's a problem, here's how to handle it. With Seligman, it's much longer to develop. He talks through all of the issues and then gets into the work you can do. So you really would be well served reading both of them. But if you're only going to read one, I would absolutely tell you pick up Choose to Be Happy by Wayne Froggatt. The third book in this sort of how to get yourself better on the right side of health and fitness is a fantastic book by a Runner's World contributor named Alex Hutchinson. He's absolutely fantastic to read. He's got a regular column in Runner's World, and he's done a few bigger pieces in Runner's World as well. And his Twitter handle is Sweat Science, so you should absolutely follow Alex as well. But his book is called Which Comes First, Cardio or Weights? And that is a question he directly tackles in the book, but it goes far beyond that. And it's really about the science behind exercise and how to use that science to get the results you're after. So for example, in that key question, which comes first, cardio or weights? The answer is, as with many things in life, it depends. But which one you choose will actually impact the results that you get. So I do a mixed exercise. I do some cardio and I do some weights or some body weight exercises. And what Hutchinson finds through his research is that actually whichever one you start with sets the tone for what will happen as a result of that exercise. So if you start with cardio, your body will develop the cardiorespiratory skills that it needs. And it's not to say it won't develop bigger muscles, or if you start with weights that you won't develop cardiovascular skills or cardiorespiratory skills or abilities, but they're sort of second fiddle to the one that you start with. So if you're someone who really wants to bulk up, the answer is don't start with cardio, it's start with weights. If you're someone who is maybe a runner or ballet dancer or something where it's more about being sort of trim and nimble, you probably don't want to start with weights, you want to start with cardio. This is a gross simplification of the learnings in the book, so I haven't just given away the whole thing. You really should pick it up. And as I say, it goes way beyond just, do I lift first or do I hop on the elliptical or the bike first? It's much deeper than that. And he's got a great style. It's very attainable information. So which comes first, cardio or weights, by Alex Hutchinson. The last one, just finished it. It's absolutely fantastic. It's called Anatomy for Runners. It's by a physical therapist and the former head of the UVA Gait Lab, a guy named Jay DeSherry. Absolutely fantastic book that really teaches you almost how to be your own physical therapist. So he goes through biomechanics, and it is geared towards runners, but he does broaden a lot of the points out, and you can see how it would be important for non-runners as well. Jay also fits people for proper road bike fittings and triathletes, and you have to get the right fit on your bike. So he's got that in mind too. It's not just really about runners, but his main focus is runners. But he teaches from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet, the right way that your body should be moving, how to spot issues in how your body moves, and what sort of problem areas you're going to develop or what injuries you might develop as a result, and what to do about it. So he does a great job through the whole book about the kinetic chain and the way that our body all works together, and then starts to talk through very specific issues a lot of people face and all the exercises you can do. And he's really realistic. He does it in a really accessible, everyday sort of way. I think it's an absolutely fantastic book. I've recommended it to a number of people that are really interested in health and fitness, maybe battling an injury, and are not medically minded, because he's not writing it for doctors or PhDs. He's writing it for any athlete, or really anyone who might have a goal of being healthier and fitter and more active, and might be dealing with some sort of physical issue like joint pain or muscle pain. And it's just a great book. You should really pick it up. So Jay DeSherry's Anatomy for Runners. So those are the 4 mind and body focused books that I'd say if you only read 4 books, you got to read those 4. One of the books I used to recommend really strongly was The 4-Hour Body by Tim Ferriss. I still do recommend the book, but I'm very selective in recommending it. There's a few pieces of it that I would recommend. The chapters on the slow carb diet I would recommend. I'd also recommend the ones on the MED, the minimum effective dose. But beyond that, it's really up to you what you're interested in. The book is, like all of his books, sort of a collection of disjointed pieces that have almost nothing to do with each other. So don't feel the need to read the whole book. And as many people have pointed out with his books, there's some, questionably offensive material in there. He takes a sexual tone at times in a couple of the chapters. So by all means, if that does not sit well with you, don't buy the book, or at the very least skip those chapters. But I think you can get the same information from these other books that I'm talking about. The diet learnings that Tim Ferriss talks about, Why We Get Fat, is really the foundational work behind that. So I would skip Tim's book and read Why We Get Fat. And the smarts around exercise, which comes first, cardio or weights, that can really get you there as well and teach you what you really need. There's also a really fun book by a guy named AJ Jacobs. It's called Drop Dead Healthy, and he basically spends a year trying to become the healthiest man in the world by following all these tips and advice and research out there and sort of living an experiment for a year. You can pick up a lot of the same learnings that Tim Ferriss had by reading that book, and it's a lot of fun. It's sort of a year in the life of this guy, very autobiographical, but he's got a great style. He's really funny. So the 4-Hour Body is good. I just think it's a bit much, and it's sort of scattered all over the place, as Tim Ferriss's books tend to be, but that's his intent. I'm not knocking him, that's what he set out for. I just think it's a bit much for most people to pick up. So if you do get it, don't feel like you can't just hone in on 3 or 4 chapters and just read those and set the others aside. It's a long book, it's a lot to take in, and a lot of it will have nothing to do with what you're going for. So Why We Get Fat, Choose to Be Happy, Which Comes First, Cardio or Weights, and Anatomy for Runners. On the lighter side of things, Some of these books aren't very light, but they're fantastic books. They're incredibly inspirational, educational, and motivational. I've got two of them sitting right here next to me, and the reason why I only have two is most of my books I buy electronically, and I read them on the train. But these were both given to me by my wife, so really good, I think, Christmas present last year, maybe birthday present, I don't remember, but I loved them anyway. So the first one is The Long Run. You can see that. It's by a guy named Matt Long. So hence the name of the book. Incredible story of what happened to this guy. So this is a New York City firefighter. You may have heard about his story during the transportation strike in the city. He was run over by a commuter bus that one of the companies had hired out for its workers. He was on his bike. The bus made an illegal turn and basically crushed him. And miraculously, he survived. And this book basically goes through his story. This man was an pretty much elite athlete before the accident, running the New York City Marathon in great time, qualifying for Boston, getting into triathlons, and that was all cut short by the bike. But he actually goes through his recovery in this book and talks about his attempt to get back into running and triathlons. And it's an incredibly inspiring story, and it's not this sort of like unicorns and rainbows type inspiring story that you might get out of a movie or a TV show. It's real. So he has a lot of real pain, and he has a lot of real doubt and dark days, and he shares those with you in a very personal way. So this isn't just going to be like, oh, I'm not him, I could never do that. You'll see the connection with yourself. He's a real person, and he has real struggles, and he shares those, but he also overcomes them. So The Long Run by Matt Long, fantastic book. The next one I would say is an autobiography by a guy named Dean Karnazes. His name may sound familiar to many of you. I've talked about him quite a bit. I actually got to meet him a couple months ago, which was awesome. He signed a poster for me and did a little video and a few photos with me, which was just really cool. Incredibly inspirational guy. Ultramarathon Man is the first of his 3 books, and it's basically his story of basically his life up until he really gets into ultra running. So Dean runs ultra marathons, and that's his full-time job. He's a professional athlete and professional runner, and he's done some pretty amazing things. So he's sponsored by North Face, and with North Face he's done the Endurance 50 Challenge, which was 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days. He has run across the desert. He's run across the Antarctic. He's take your choice. He's done it. He's a pretty amazing guy. So Dean Karnazes' first book, Ultramarathon Man, I would highly recommend. I also like his second book, and that's about the 50 marathons in 50 days in 50 states. But I actually prefer the documentary that was made to the book. The book gets a little bit darker because he definitely had struggles. You don't pick that up in the documentary, but I just felt like the documentary, the message was stronger, and it was just a bit easier to take in. The book was just a bit much, but it's still a good book. And his latest book, I didn't care for as much. It's okay, but I felt like he's sort of reaching to fill a third book. No knock on Dean, I think incredibly highly of the guy, and I'm so glad I read the book. But if you could only pick one of his 3 books, read Ultramarathon Man, but then pick up his movie as well, and you can search Netflix or Amazon for that. If you search for Dean Karnazes, you'll find everything that he's done. Really inspiring guy, and just a cool life story too, because it's not like he's always been this big runner. He stopped running as a kid and picked it up on his 30th birthday. Got back into it and never looked back, basically. The next book is Eat and Run by Scott Jurek, who is also a world-famous ultramarathoner and holds a lot of records and won a lot of ultramarathons in his day. Scott's also vegetarian, and I may be wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure he's a vegan as well. So his book is really clever. It's his autobiography, and it's mixed with diet. So he talks about his transformation from eating meat into not eating meat, but also gives you recipes and tips along the way. And he's got really just an incredible life story. He's a really inspiring guy, and it's just a great book. It's interesting how it ends, because he's not really done living his life, and there's still much more to come. So it ends in this sort of not limbo, but you kind of wonder what's going to happen next. So I do hope he has a follow-up book in a few years at least. because I'd love to see how things develop for him some more. But I learned about the two of them in a really pivotal running book by a guy named Christopher McDougall called Born to Run. Anyone who talks about running, they're like, you've got to read this book. It's the runner's book, and it's an awesome story. It's really well told. It's about ultra running. Scott Jurek is in it. But basically, Chris goes down to Mexico and runs with the Tarahumara. It's a native tribe down in Mexico that basically just runs, and they love it, and that's what they do, and they smile the whole time, and they're the running people, basically, is what their name means in their language. It's Raramuri, is how they would call themselves. And it's a fantastic story. McDougall tells it really brilliantly. So it's about the Tarahumara. It's about an ultramarathon race that is started down there by this guy who goes by Caballo Blanco, is the name that he uses. He actually just passed away about a year ago. But it follows, the setup of this race and the characters involved in it, and it really just, everyone who reads it seems to come away totally inspired to go run. So you've got to pick up Chris McDougall's Born to Run, and that, if you read nothing else, that's probably the one book I would tell you to read, because everything else is going to follow from it. You'll be so inspired, and you'll want to get out there. You'll probably also want to run barefoot or in a pair of Vibrams, but that's a whole different discussion. There's two other books that I would tell you about, and one of them is somewhat off the running path, but the main character is a famous runner. It's called Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand, and she is the author of Seabiscuit. It's really a great book. It's about Louis Zamperini, who is a famous runner who went to the Olympics in Munich before World War II and then ended up in the war and ended up a POW in Japan. And it's basically his life story, incredibly powerful. Laura writes the book just amazingly. If you haven't read Seabiscuit, that's also a fantastic book. She is such a talented writer. But they're actually making a movie of Unbroken right now, and I'm really looking forward to it. But Zamperini's incredibly inspiring. He's got demons. You see that battle through. He lives with demons. You see him battling them in his, the guards who run the camp that he's in. But just a fantastically written book, really gripping, really inspiring and motivating. While Zamperini is a runner, you don't necessarily, you're not going to walk away like you would from Born to Run, being like, I have to go run. But it's just an incredible book, really enjoyable, and it will motivate you and inspire you and teach you a bit about mental toughness. So, Unbroken, absolutely fantastic book. The last one is this little guy sitting here. I like it for a few reasons. It's called The Runner's Guide to the Meaning of Life. It's by a Runner's World editor, Amby Burfoot. He was one of the early on Boston Marathon winners. Not that early on, but he's been running pretty much his whole life. He's a great guy. His writing style is just so accessible and fantastic, and I feel good reading any of his articles in Runner's World. I loved reading this book. One of the reasons I recommend it is not just how good it is and how nice it is, but it's pretty short. It's really easy to take in. The chapters are broken up nicely, but you feel great reading it. You feel really good about yourself, and you see runners in this fantastic light as this great group of people. He keeps referring to the group of runners as we runners. We runners do this, we runners feel that way. And you just feel like a family and ownership, and it leaves you feeling great and very inspired. So Amby Burfoot, read anything of his that you can. You definitely won't regret it. Definitely read his articles in Runner's World. You can get them at runnersworld.com if you don't have a subscription. If you want a subscription, go to newbodies/books, and there's a link to Runner's World right there. But this is a great book. You've got to pick it up. So The Runner's Guide, I have to look at it because it's a long title, The Runner's Guide to the Meaning of Life by Amby Burfoot. I love that his name has foot in it and he's a runner. I think that's great. That is not on purpose. That's his real name. So, how many was that? That's 9 books. And that's why the 10th principle is read, because the only way you're going to get through these things is if you really get to reading. So, I've never thought of myself as a reader, and I can't stop now. So, I've taken to reading on the train while I commute to work, when I commute under my own power. I don't read, and so I get behind during the spring and summer and the early fall because I tend to be running or riding my bike when I go into work, so I miss out on the reading. But I've just found that using time when I'm not otherwise engaged to read is a fantastic way to build my mind, to build my education base, so that I can keep my health and fitness going, and I can take inspiration and motivation from others who have been through things similar or much worse or tougher than anything I have or will ever go through, and that keeps me going. So don't just get out there, don't just exercise, don't just eat smarter, but feed your mind as well. Give yourself a richer base from which to make the right life decisions. That, the final of our 10 principles, is really how you will enlighten your body.